Hello, hi. My name is Sibylla Tringham and I'm the Programme Coordinator of the MA in Conservation of Wall Paintings here at the Courtauld in London. Welcome to our virtual open day. I'm here with Austin Nevin, who's the Head of Conservation, and we'd like to introduce you to the three-year MA programme in Conservation of Wall Paintings. I'm going to give a short presentation about some of the aspects of the course, and then Austin will talk a little bit later about the application process. And then after the presentations, we'll have a session for questions and answers. So I want to start off by looking at some fabulous wall paintings. And most of those that follow are from sites where we've been working over the last few years. So wall paintings are a really special part of our cultural heritage, and they date from Neolithic times to the present day. And they decorate a really wide range of different structures. They're present in a wide range of climates, and they're usually made with local materials, and therefore they reflect the geology and the building practices of where they're made. And so there are wall paintings in desert palaces in India. And we can find wall paintings in rock-cut churches in Georgia, along the Silk Road in Western China, and in subterranean crypts in Malta. There are very famous wall paintings in the ancient temples in Egypt, and in Buddhist temples high up in the Himalayas in Bhutan, in medieval churches in England, and grand Baroque schemes. Again, these are ones in Malta. And of course, murals continue to be created today. Sorry, it's flipping through a little bit fast. And this is Somerset House, where the Courtauld is based. And it's a centre, it's a leading centre for the education and research in wall painting conservation. The programme in wall painting conservation was set up in 1985, and over the last 30 years, it's had a major impact on the care of wall paintings globally. Graduates of the programme go on to have significant roles in conservation of wall paintings and other aspects of cultural heritage, with positions at leading heritage institutions around the world, or as practicing conservators. There are other closely related paths for graduates too, and some graduates choose to work in conservation science or preventive conservation, while others teach or continue research. The programme here is one of two practical MA programmes in conservation that's offered at the Courtauld, with the other specialises in easel painting conservation. We have close ties with the easel painting course, and while the fields have some commonalities in methods, analytical equipment, and the types of questions being asked, for example, the application and the way we work is really very different. So it's important to make sure you think carefully about which one is suited to you if you're thinking of applying to both courses. The MA in Conservation wall paintings will now be running every year with 4 students in each cohort. We're currently based at Vernon Square in King's Cross, but we are expecting to return for the most part to our campus in Somerset House in October 2022. These spaces have been refurbished and will have a fantastic new studio space, workroom and analytical lab. We have a really wonderful range of analytical equipment in the department, especially portable kit that we can take on site. So for example, portable FTIR, XRF, Raman, and portable microscopes. And we have all sorts of equipment for visible multispectral imaging and for monitoring various aspects of the environment. We also have a wonderful historic sample and fragment collection with fragments and samples from wall paintings all over the world. And these are an extremely useful reference for us. And in particular, they're also used in the second year when we're learning about technical analysis. The Conservation Department also has an extensive collection of conservation books and journals, as well as the National Survey of Historic Wall Paintings in the British Isles. Now, this is regularly consulted by art historians and conservators and other scholars. And it's an enormous archive which contains records of all surviving and recorded medieval wall paintings throughout the British Isles, as well as extensive records of post-medieval wall paintings, from the grandest Baroque schemes to humble domestic interiors. The material includes photographic records, conservation reports, as well as published and unpublished art historical material. And it's continually being added to over the years. And it really is an unparalleled resource for wall paintings in the British Isles. So that's a little bit about the resources that we have. Let's talk about the programme. So the 3-year Masters is entirely devoted to wall painting conservation, and it is only one of a handful of MA courses with this focus. The programme is full-time, with teaching in the first and second years through lectures and seminars, practical sessions in the lab and in the workroom. There are lots of site visits, and there's a period of research in the third year. And throughout the course, there are extended periods of fieldwork. In the first year, students look in depth at materials and technology of wall paintings around the world and through the ages. So from ancient Greek wall paintings to medieval English wall paintings, Roman wall paintings and Renaissance wall paintings. We also look at paintings in China, India and beyond. There's a course on principles and theory, which introduces issues of change and deterioration and looks at different approaches to conservation practice and how they've evolved. And it also looks at different types of interventions and materials. And again, we take a very international view and look at different approaches. We look at conservation decision making, and this helps to develop our critical skills and to create a solid ethical foundation for practice. And the first year also brings an appreciation of the wall paintings through their historical and through art historical study. So in the first year, when the students are learning about materials and technologies, they create several replicas with different types of support. For example, with earthen supports or lime plaster supports. Students look into using different types of pigments, different types of binders, gilding sometimes. And this is a really great way to get to grips with all the different types of materials and how they behave, and with various techniques. It also provides the opportunity to look at original treatises and to start becoming familiar with looking at analytical data to get this information from. And then these replicas, as you can see, are then used during other practical sessions throughout the programme, for example, testing conservation treatments or taking samples. Imaging is extremely important for us, and also taking images on site with variable lighting and space constraints can be really quite challenging. So the students need to become proficient in imaging and methods for documenting and recording wall paintings. So we spend a good amount of time practicing this. In the first year, there are also visits to important wall painting sites in the UK. And these are a really fantastic opportunity to draw all of the teaching threads together. So the art history, technology, history of conservation practice, deterioration and change, ethics, etc. They all come together when we go onto site and start looking at wall paintings. And we also can use these site visits to practice our photographic skills and to see how difficult it really is taking photographs in unevenly lit and large but often restricted spaces. So the second year has more specialised courses which look in depth at environmental causes of deterioration and their prevention. It also looks at scientific examination and analysis, including microscopy, and advanced remedial treatments. And again, there's more fieldwork in the second year. So during the teaching, students will practice techniques to investigate deterioration mechanisms and learn how to set up environmental monitoring strategies. And they also get to grips with collecting and, most importantly, interpreting environmental data. And again, much of what's learnt in the classroom is put into practice on site during the fieldwork. The scientific examination course looks at different invasive and non-invasive analytical techniques to understand the technology and deterioration mechanisms affecting wall paintings. And in this course, students will practice these techniques by examining a fragment from our fragment archive. Students will also learn how to carry out multispectral imaging, a technique which is extremely useful for characterizing non-visible components of wall paintings. The Advanced Remedial Techniques course looks in more detail at the issues, materials and practices of treatment, such as grouting, consolidation and cleaning. And in particular, students will learn how to select and assess the success of various remedial treatments. Then towards the end of the second year, the students prepare for their final year research project through a literature survey and project proposal. So the department's fieldwork projects involve conservation, research and teaching. And each fieldwork is tailored through the 3 years to bring together all that is learned in the classroom, to provide a range of practical experiences from documentation to investigation and interventions. A high supervisor to student ratio ensures that the student benefit from a high level of supervision. And this MA is rather exceptional in that all travel and accommodation costs for fieldwork are paid for by the department. So our current projects are in India and the UK, and this is Nagar Fort in Rajasthan, and it's a wonderful example of Rajput Mughal architecture. Dating primarily from the 18th century, the buildings in the large fortified palace have recently been conserved by the Merenga Museum Trust. And there are several palaces here, and they're all beautifully decorated with wall paintings, and many of the women engaged in various activities, playing musical instruments, playing with animals and birds, eating and bathing. They're really spectacular paintings. It's a wonderful site. And we've been working here since 2005 in partnership with the Merenga Museum Trust. The other site that we're working at is Longthought Tower and near Peterborough in the UK. And the paintings there are an extraordinary survival of 14th century wall paintings and one of the most important medieval secular schemes in Northern Europe. We're working in collaboration with English Heritage, and we've begun a new project to address the conservation and presentation issues here. So when we're on site, the students are involved in all aspects of the conservation project to foster their professional development. So it's not just about the investigations and the practical interventions, but the students are also given managerial responsibilities so that they understand how a project of this size takes place and all the things that need to be carried out. They also make presentations to the public and stakeholders. So it's a sort of a very rounded experience for the students here. So the third year is divided between individual research projects and fieldwork. The students carry out research in a really wide range of different areas, from investigating aspects of technique, of treatment, causes of deterioration or preventative approaches, documentation, all subjects which address really key issues in conservation of wall paintings and help to progress the field. So here are just a few sort of recent examples. One piece of research by Wendy Rose examines the potential of photogrammetry as a tool for high resolution condition monitoring on wall paintings. Another student examined the occurrence of metal soaps in wall paintings, and these are a really sort of disfiguring phenomenon which are more commonly found in oil-based easel paintings. Another student looked at conservation approaches of Georgian wall paintings, while another student, and these are all from the same cohort, looked at customized statistical and analysis software to improve the way that we use environmental data. So you can see that they're all really, really wide-ranging and we aim to support the students' key interests and also answering really key conservation questions. And there's also a really great opportunity to build on existing strengths and skills, and also to develop new ones. A lot of the students also find that it's a great opportunity to build a professional network by speaking to specialists in complementary fields. So that largely brings me to the end of this presentation. Just say a few words about the kind of students that we're looking for. We're really looking for students with a range of backgrounds in sciences, arts, or humanities. We don't need students to have specifically an artistic background. In fact, we like to have a cohort with students with different backgrounds. We find that provides a really great learning context, learning environment. We don't require or expect any prior experience in conservation, but we like to see a demonstrable interest and commitment to the profession. A solid academic record is also important, as it is a highly academic course, as well as being very practical. And we need competence in English, good hand skills, good manual dexterity is an advantage, as well as good observational skills. The application deadline is Tuesday the 4th of January, and interviews are expected to take place in February. And offer holders will be asked to complete an online chemistry course that we will provide and assess. So I'm now going to hand over to Austin, who will talk a little bit more about the application process.
Thank you so much, Sibylla. I'm the head of conservation here at the Courtauld, and the Department of Conservation, as Sibylla indicated, is both easel paintings and wall paintings conservation. So I've got some information here from the PG admissions, who will be managing the first step in the admissions process. And I'm going to try to relay that to you in case you have specific questions about this aspect of the your application. So one of the things that is very important is that you come with a good degree, a first degree. So this is a postgraduate degree in MA, and it requires that you have a bachelor's degree already. You might not have finished your bachelor's yet, but you'll need to get at least a 2-1 or the overseas equivalent of that degree to apply for a master's in the UK. You can contact the admissions if you have any questions about that and about the equivalence of your degrees. You'll be submitting your application online, as Sibylla just indicated, and we are expecting the application online to open within the next week or so, but we will let you know by email when that happens. You can find all the details on the link that is being posted here in the chat. The deadline, as Sibylla said, is the 4th of January, so that gives you all of your holidays to prepare your personal statement. We asked everybody to give a 500-word motivating statement explaining why it is that you want to study with us. And also, you can highlight in that 500 words any information you think that we should know about you, which might be relevant to your application. This is not personal details. This is more, I studied X for this reason, or I'm particularly interested in this aspect of wall paintings, for example. We also ask for your transcripts from your previous degree, as well as references. And you need to give the names of references, and the references will be sending their statements about you before we fully process all the applications. But the references don't have to come with the application. Your CV is also important, and I would highlight just to give us an overview of your background and what you have done, especially if you have come from a different profession or if you have experience that you think is particularly relevant. We're not asking for people to have conservation experience. We're not asking for you to have worked on conservation sites. If you have done, or if you have other experience you think is relevant, please include that in your CV. The other aspect, which is very important, is the English language tests. You have to demonstrate, if you are not a native English speaker, that you have English proficiency. As Sibylla indicated, this does require a lot of writing and reading in English language, and therefore, if you haven't done an English test, you'll have to prepare for a test and produce an English language test certificate before enrolling in the Courtauld. And that's the same in all UK universities. And also, you might need to indicate your passport and visa situation, because if you're accepted onto the program, of course, we will help you and arrange visas for you if you are not a UK resident. And normally we have 2 weeks between the deadline on the 4th of January and the deadline for your references to be sent. And sometimes you need to chase your references to make sure they have sent them. We'll let you know though if there's an issue with that aspect. Now, as I think Sibylla may have mentioned, we have, after the applications are received, we'll have an interview for the candidates we select on a shortlist, and that will be online rather than in person, and will be a series of tests regarding both your ability to engage with questions regarding your observational skills, as well as color vision tests and manual dexterity, as well as the writing example. And we'll let you know the outcome of this interview in February or March, or late February, early March. Depending on how many applicants we have and so on and so forth. The funding outcome decisions are based on whether or not you apply and you indicate you need funding. We have significant and generous funding at the Courtauld, but the process for applying for that funding is that you indicate on your application if you need funding, and then if you are given a place, we then are able to consider you for scholarships. So that's, I think, a very important thing to recognize, that funding is not decided on until after you have a place. And we would tend to make a decision, an offer of funding around the beginning of April, which would allow you to decide if you're in a position or not to accept an offer. And I hope the other thing is there are different fees for different students, if you're home students or if you're overseas students, and you should get in touch with the admissions about that if you have any questions. My understanding is if you have right to remain status in the UK, you are a home student, even if you're not a UK citizen. So it doesn't depend on what your citizenship is. It depends where you're resident, and you need to have the right to remain, to have home status. And you can find details of the fees at the Courtauld also on our webpage. The applications for the Courtauld scholarship for 22-23 will be made early in next year, so you'll be able to see those online. And the important aspect of the scholarships to recognize is, because it's a 3-year program, if you get a scholarship in the first year, that same scholarship will continue for all 3 years of the program. Accommodation in London is another issue, which, as you understood, probably is a major factor, but I think you can keep updated about the offers that Courtauld will be able to provide and that are available through the University of London, which may or may not be of interest to you. And I'd say otherwise, get in touch with me, with Sibylla, and with PG Admissions if you have specific questions that we can't answer today in our Q&A session. So what I'm going to do now is open up the floor to you, and you can use the chat to ask questions about the program, about the admissions, about wall paintings, because this is a chance for you and your fellow attendees to ask questions which we might be able to which we're going to answer regarding the course and the program itself. So I don't see questions yet, but I imagine that you might want to start writing. So here's the first question: do I have to live in London during the course? I'll answer that quickly because I know the answer to that. The answer is that we don't care where you live. There's no statutory requirement in terms of residency at the University of London, unlike other universities. So if you wanted to live in the Hebrides and commute to London, that is your business. However, I think that in a full-time course like this one, you need to consider carefully where it is that you want to sleep at night and where it is you want to study. And the expectation is that most of the teaching will be face-to-face, and therefore you would need to come to lessons on a regular basis. And the teaching in wall paintings and in conservation in general is more intensive than the teaching you might have on other MA programs where you are not expected to be at the institute every day. My expectation is that you would probably be in the department about 80% of the time during term time, and that during field work, as Sibylla indicated, your costs will be covered by the department, but that is if we are not in London. And if we are in London on field work, we're not going to be covering your accommodation costs. It's only if you're outside of London and you can't commute. Okay, so maybe I'll let Sibylla answer the next questions. How many potential students typically apply for each year for the 4 places? This is from Camilla.
We have typically sort of 6 to 8 applicants for each place. The program is recently changed from cohort once every 3 years to an annual intake. So it is a bit different, but we do see that has a huge number of benefits, not least because you get to have cohort and colleagues who you can talk to between each of the years. So typically there are sort of 6 to 8 applicants for each place.
And the next question is about funding for international students and or UK residents. And I'll answer that one. It's the funding is not necessarily linked to residency. So we have different types of scholarships at the Courtauld for different students. However, my strong recommendation would be that you investigate what you're able to apply for in your home country too, because there are specific funds that can support international students, which are not available to UK students, for example, which are not managed by the Courtauld. And therefore, you need to be aware that studying is a costly venture, and it will be very important that you apply for funding that you are eligible for in your home country as well. And you can find details of links to that both on the British Council site as well as on the Courtauld site. But I think it's very important that you consider that aspect of the, because it's quite tricky to work at the same time as you're studying. However, just to answer Sarah's question, can I work part-time during studies? As I said, you can do study. We cannot prescribe your time outside of studying and outside of the normal working day at the institute. So of course you can work part-time. I think the issue is that it might be tricky to manage part-time working during the academic day, but there is ample opportunity to get jobs both at the Courtauld as assistants, program assistants, as well as, of course, in London there are opportunities. I think it is a challenge. I tend to encourage students to think about applying for jobs in holiday time and in outside of the academic year. But that, of course, depends on your own circumstances. So do you want to answer the next question about international fieldwork?
International fieldwork in these times. We have both international and national fieldwork projects, and for the first year we would be expecting to work in the UK on that fieldwork at Longthought, which I mentioned earlier. And so that gives us a little bit of time to review our travel situation and our international fieldwork. So currently we would be working in the UK for the first year and review the situation in the second year, which would be in a couple of years' time.
That's right. I think we don't have a crystal ball in terms of how the COVID situation and the other pandemics that we've all witnessed. We worked in China shortly after the first SARS epidemic, as well as the other problems that we faced in international travel. But as soon as we are able to safely travel, and we will be planning to return to international sites as well. And I should say that the we have had international students. We've welcomed international students this year at the Courtauld, and that's been it's been very positive to see people back in the classroom. But I am very aware that traveling is not what used to be, and so traveling is something you will have to plan carefully so you come in time. And we do have accommodation at the University of London specifically for people who need it from abroad. But I think that we can't guarantee exactly what's going to happen in 2022, let alone 2023. But we have things lined up already, as Sibylla said, some very fantastic and important sites to learn on. What about the other question from Pinar about a BA background in fine art?
Absolutely. We would welcome somebody with that sort of background, and indeed many of our some of our graduates do have backgrounds in fine art. I think what's key to recognize and to is that it is an academic program. Your artistic skills would certainly stand you in good stead, but there is also a lot of academic studying, and so it was I'm not sure what proportion different fine art programs have for sort of academic study, but that is a key component of this program. And so we would want to demonstrate that you were capable and confident with that part of the program as well.
I think it's very much a learning process, and that Sibylla's absolutely right. We often take fine art students in conservation, and if you're interested and you're intellectually stimulated, you will find a way. But I think that it is a challenge because there's a lot of reading to do and a lot of writing to do at the beginning of the course, particularly, and you're expected to be able to produce written documentation as well as photographic documentation. And so your skills in writing will be important. How about Julie Gallagher? Sibylla, do you want to take that question?
If the student is not accepted onto the course, are there other practical courses or assistant work that the Courtauld could point unlucky applicants in the direction of? For wall painting conservation, there's not so much, I think, or assistant work. As a difficult question. I think if there could be a conversation, sort of case by case conversation of where that person's strengths might lie, as to what could be their next step, and if they were really committed to following the program, they can always apply the following year, and that's sort of one of the really nice things about this being an annual intake this time, is that if you're unlucky the first time, you can apply. There's only 1 year to wait to apply again.
Very good, very good. I completely agree with you, Sibylla. So about the chemistry course that Claire is asking about, so I'll just give you a bit of background. In the past, we had chemistry as part of the program, but we've taken it, we've made it like a prerequisite now of starting the degree, because we felt that we needed to focus as much as we possibly could in the new semester structure that we will have on core modules of conservation. And you will be needing science knowledge throughout the course, because from the very beginning, when we discuss degradation and deterioration, as well as handling of materials and the chemical reactions that occur when lime reacts with carbon dioxide to make calcium carbonate, for example, those you will be seeing and experiencing in the very first weeks of the course. What we've decided is that we will be offering a science revision course for all those students who come without chemistry backgrounds, and you will be able to take the course from the moment you're on you have a formal offer, or if you're on a reserve list, and this will be through the Courtauld, so that you can actually do a science course in basic chemistry, which will prepare you to embark on the conservation practicals and the conservation principles and conservation materials courses that will be starting in the very first year. So I think we will be launching these in April, around the time of your offer, and it will be an online course so that you can do it at your leisure, with the idea that you will complete the course and have a proof of understanding by the end of it. And I'm actually a real convert in terms of online courses and online materials, because I think there's just so very much of these. But the real idea is that we will provide you with the kind of basic science knowledge that you might have if you had an A-level or an advanced GCSE in chemistry, so that you understand some of the concepts that will be fundamental for your learning in the degree. And that will be offered to everybody who's given a place or is on a reserve list. So that means that if you're on a reserve list for some reason and you don't make it this year, you can carry your qualification on for the following year. Do you want to answer Sarah's question about what is demonstrable interest in wall paintings? Further readings or frequent visits? What would you expect, Sibylla?
Yeah, I think that's a very good question, and certainly reading. We, in the interview, we want to have a nice conversation. We want to talk to you about wall paintings because that's what we're passionate about. And so to see, to be able to talk to you about wall paintings that you might have seen, and they could be, they could be from anywhere, but if you don't have wall paintings within access to you, it could be things that you've looked at online, or wall paintings that you've seen television programs about, or it might be ethical debates that you've studied or that you've learnt about, and you think, oh, well, this is really interesting. Reading, of course, that would be great. We want to have a good conversation. We would expect to have a good conversation about some aspect of wall paintings with you. As I said, whether that's something about an aspect that you've seen, or that you've studied, or you've heard about, or that you're interested in. We want to see you get as excited about wall paintings as we are. I hope that's I hope that answers your question.
I would agree, but read around, convince yourself that you're interested in this course, because we don't want to convince you at the interview. We want you to come. We need to be convinced. It's a big commitment, and 3 years studying in master's program is a big commitment, and we understand that, and we want to make sure that it's absolutely the right decision for you, and obviously for us to offer you a position. I referenced a little bit earlier about the difference between wall painting conservation and easel painting conservation. They're very, very different fields, and they're the different fields are particularly attract different types of people. And so obviously wall painting conservation, typically the people who practice it, they're excited by travel. They like being on site. They like being surrounded by the art. They can manage without home comforts, or with fewer home comforts, perhaps for short periods of time. That happens. They can work in what might not be very comfortable environments that might be a bit chilly or a bit hot. So basically, they're often uncontrolled environments, whereas if you're working in easel paintings, typically, not all the time, but typically you'd be working in a studio. Also, we're working on a much, much larger scale. So that has a big impact on the way that we work. Typically we're working on a scaffolding, for example. So that's, these are sort of really key aspects. This is a lifestyle, the way that we work, key aspects that are different between the two areas, and that you would want to sort of really make sure that you were applying to the right program. So I have a question from Jivan about portfolios and writing samples applied for the application. So we don't have a mechanism at the moment for accepting portfolios per se when you apply, but you would be, if you are offered for an interview, we would ask to see writing samples. And of course, if you wanted to bring a portfolio with you when you come to interview, that would also be absolutely fine. We don't request portfolios in the same way that some other conservation programs do, because we feel that that's not as important to demonstrate. But if you have one, we'd be very, very curious.
And just to sort of follow up on that, which I sort of anticipating the next question, as in what would somebody expect to be a portfolio? Again, we're really flexible on what might be included in a portfolio, and it's something that we want to something to demonstrate your interest, your passion, your skills, for example. So if you studied fine art, show us some of your artwork. If you've been to some fascinating sites, show us some photographs that we can, provide a platform to talk about. If you've written an essay about ethical issues in conservation, if you happen to have studied a little bit beforehand, bring that in. If there's other sort of craft work that you like doing, that can demonstrate your hand skills, bring photographs of that. So it's really sort of, a portfolio is very flexible in terms of what we might expect, and it's really just something to sort of, we hope would help demonstrate some of the skills that we're looking for our applicants and for our students.
It's very good. I wonder if there are other questions that you might have about the application. We didn't really mention, maybe I should just highlight this, that the graduates of our programs are very successful in finding employment and jobs in different fields. I think Sibylla mentioned this already, but I actually studied wall paintings at the Courtauld with Sibylla. We studied together 20 years ago, and the program gave me a kind of springboard for a academic career, and I did research after the degree, and that's one pathway that one can have after the program. So it is an enabling MA degree for further research. I ended up doing a PhD afterwards, and then stayed in research and academia. Other people have gone on instead to private practice, to work with institutions and to work in their home countries or different countries. So I think it's worth highlighting that this is very much an enabling experience to do an MA in wall painting conservation. It's challenging, it's exciting, and I think I had no idea when I started that I would be traveling quite as much as we did and visiting places that are absolutely inaccessible to anybody else in the whole world except conservators. So we got to go on scaffolding up to touch or look this close to Giotto's paintings in Florence, or to paintings in China, and paintings in Malta, which were, those are spectacular experiences. And also it really prepared me for this great, exciting future, shall I say. So I think that's something just to enthuse you a little bit about the subjects, and I hope that you consider applying. And we look forward to receiving your applications and any other questions you might have. Sibylla, do you want to say some concluding remarks, and then we can wrap up the session?
Well, I just support that. It is a fantastic degree, and as Austin mentioned, we've been through it, and so we're sort of best placed to lead it, I think. And there are lots of fascinating wall paintings all over the world, and once you really start sort of opening your eyes to all of this incredible cultural heritage, many of these wall paintings have been around for hundreds and hundreds of years, but you sort of start to realize suddenly how extraordinarily fragile they are and how vulnerable they are to all sorts of different mechanisms, whether that's through lack of maintenance, or through aspects of tourism, or through issues of the original technology failing. Wall paintings, they're so varied and they're all over the world, and it's just a really, really fascinating area to work in. And also the work that we do is so incredibly diverse. So whatever your strengths are, whether that's working, you have fantastic hand skills, or whether you're really interested in analysis, or whether you're really interested in how the environment impacts wall paintings, there'll be something that you can really get your teeth into. So it's a really fantastic field. And I think if that's if there aren't any more questions, I think we'll wrap up about there. Thank you for listening, and do get in touch if you have any further questions.
Thank you. Bye, everybody.
Bye bye.